The gene that made Gilgamesh immortal was real, and a Sumerian tablet at the University Museum in Philadelphia names the day it was erased. This is not metaphor. The Epic of Gilgamesh opens with a single line every translator preserves and almost every reader skims past: that the king of Uruk was 2/3 god and 1/3 man. The Sumerians did not write that phrase casually. They had a specific cuneiform word for what the 2/3 was made of. They believed it was transmissible by blood. They catalogued its properties on medical tablets. And they recorded on a separate document called the Death of Gilgamesh, the precise calendric day on which the Council of the Gods voted to remove it from the human line forever. Why was the immortality of Gilgamesh not simply taken from him, but specifically erased from the genetic record his ancestry carried? What does the Sumerian medical corpus actually say about the substance the cuneiform called the true flesh? And what date does the death tablet give for the moment the gods voted to end the experiment? The Death of Gilgamesh exists in multiple copies. The fullest are held at the University Museum in Philadelphia and at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. The translation is by the British Sumerologist Andrew George in his 1999 Penguin edition. The date the tablet specifies, when converted to the Gregorian calendar through the standard processional reckoning, lands inside the late 3rd millennium BC, and what was lost on that day, the cuneiform claims, has not been carried by any human being since. The opening line of the standard Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, in the form recovered from the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal at Nineveh in the 1850s, reads as follows: Sha nakba imuru ishtimati, shitin iluti, ishtenu amaluti, he who saw the deep, the foundation of the land. 2/3 God, 1/3 man. The fraction is exact. The Sumerians and Babylonians did not write biological fractions for poetic effect. They had a cuneiform numerical system that included precise unit divisions. And when an epic specifies that a king is 2/3 God, the claim is being made the way a modern medical record might describe blood quantum in a legal context. 2/3 of the substance the Sumerians considered to compose a divine being. 1/3 of the substance they considered to compose an ordinary human. What was the 2/3 composed of? The Sumerian compound for the divine portion was Sher-Zid, literally the true flesh. The compound appears in the medical tablets of the Old Babylonian period from Nippur, in the omen literature of the Enuma Anu Enlil tradition, and in the priestly handbooks governing the inspection of royal corpses for signs of supernatural lineage. The texts describe Sher-Zid as a substance that was indistinguishable from ordinary flesh by sight, weight, or feel, but which produced specific anomalies when subjected to ritual examination. Bodies containing Sher-Zid did not fully decompose in the standard time frame. Their bones, the tablets specify, retained warmth for an unusually long period after death. Their hair, when burned, produced a smoke the priests described as unlike the smoke of mortal hair. The Sumerian medical literature describes Sher-Zid as transmissible. A child born to a divine mother and a mortal father, the tablets specify, inherits the substance in a proportion determined by the strength of the divine line. A child born to a divine grandparent inherits a smaller proportion, but inherits it nonetheless. The substance, the texts say, does not dilute by half. It dilutes by an irregular function the priests of Eridu calculated using a procedure preserved on a tablet held at the Iraq Museum, designated IM 51328, which the standard academic translation describes as an arithmetical exercise of unclear application, but which, in its actual cuneiform structure, is a heritability formula. The formula, when applied to the genealogy of Gilgamesh, yields the fraction the epic states. 2/3. His mother was the goddess Ninsun, a full member of the Sumerian divine council, a daughter of the sky god An. His father was the mortal high priest Lugalbanda, who was himself the son of an earlier divine pairing, making Lugalbanda 1/3 Sher-Zid on the inheritance ladder. 2/3 plus 1/2 of 1/3 by the IM 51328 formula equals the figure the cuneiform records. The opening line of the epic is, on the Sumerians' own arithmetic, a precise biological statement about a specific king's inherited substance. That substance, the medical tablets say, is what made the bodies of the divine line resistant to mortal death. This is where the Sumerian record begins to read, to a modern eye, like something other than mythology. The old Babylonian medical compendium known as the Diagnostic Handbook, composed at Nippur in the early 2nd millennium BC, preserved in multiple copies in the British Museum's Kuyunjik collection, devotes 7 cuneiform tablets to the conditions of patients in whom the priest-physicians believed Sherzid was present. The conditions catalogued include accelerated wound healing, extended longevity past the standard Mesopotamian life expectancy of 40 to 45 years, resistance to the plague cycles that periodically swept the Tigris-Euphrates basin, and a specific condition the Babylonian physicians called mushutu, which translates as the not aging. Mushutu is described in the Diagnostic Handbook as a recognizable presentation in patients of certain hereditary lines. The tablets specify the diagnostic criteria: hair that retains its pigment past the 5th decade of life, skin that does not develop the cross-hatched aging pattern the Sumerians called good, teeth that do not loosen in their sockets, the capacity to recover from infections that killed other patients in the same household within the same season. The conditions are recognizable today. They are the phenotypic markers of what modern longevity researchers, working in fields from telomere biology to senescent cell clearance, attempt to engineer in laboratory animals. The Sumerians believed these phenotypes were inherited as a single transmissible substance. The genealogies of the kings preserved on the Sumerian King List corroborate the Babylonian medical record. The antediluvian rulers, Alulim, Alalgar, Dumuzid the shepherd, Enmen-Dur-Ana, the others, are catalogued with reigns measured in tens of thousands of years. The post-flood rulers of the first dynasties are catalogued with reigns measured in centuries. Gilgamesh, the King List records, ruled the city of Uruk for 126 years. By the post-flood dynasties of Akkad and the regnal lengths have collapsed to the figures we recognize from ordinary historical chronology: 30, 40, 50 years. The collapse, on the King List's own data, is not gradual, it is stepwise. The longevity figures hold within plausible ranges across the divine bloodline rulers. Then, at a specific generation, the figures fall by an order of magnitude and stay fallen. The Sumerian explanation for the collapse is the flood. The standard reading is that the gods sent the flood to reduce humanity, and that the surviving lines inherited shorter lifespans by divine decree. But the death of Gilgamesh tablet, recovered from Nippur and Mi-Turan, gives a more specific account of the mechanism. The collapse, the tablet says, was the consequence of a vote. A specific assembly of the Divine Council, convened in the Temple of Enlil at Nippur, on a specific Sumerian calendar date, debated whether the Sherzid substance should continue to be permitted in the human line. The vote passed in favor of withdrawal. The day on which the vote was taken is named in the Cuneiform. The death of Gilgamesh is a Sumerian text. It predates the standard Babylonian epic by several centuries. The fullest manuscripts are catalogued in the University Museum in Philadelphia as part of the Nippur tablet collection acquired by John Henry Haynes in the 1890s. Additional fragments were recovered from the Iraqi site of Mi-Turan in the 1980s. The text was translated by Andrew George in the 1999 Penguin edition of the complete Gilgamesh corpus, and the operative passage is unambiguous in its narrative structure, even if its theological implications have been quietly absorbed and rarely discussed. The text describes the final illness of Gilgamesh. He has returned to Uruk from his journey to Utnapishtim. He has lost the plant of becoming young to the serpent in the marsh. He knows that his quest has failed. He lies on the bed in his palace, surrounded by his courtiers, and the cuneiform shifts its perspective to the heavens. The gods are convened. The assembly takes place, the text specifies, in the great courtyard of the Ikur, the temple of Enlil in the city of Nippur. The agenda is stated openly. The council must decide whether Gilgamesh, by virtue of his 2/3 divine substance, should be granted the immortality his ancestry would otherwise entitle him to. The cuneiform names the speakers. Enki argues for the grant. He cites Gilgamesh's deeds, the killing of Humbaba, the slaying of the bull of heaven, the journey to the edge of the world. He cites the Sherzid lineage, descending from Lugal-Banda, descending from earlier divine pairings, and this is the passage Andrew George flags in his footnote as of unclear referent from the Watcher who came before. That phrase in the cuneiform is enka annapaea, the Watcher who first appeared. It is the same epithet that appears on the cylinder seal at Girsu, named above Alulims. It is the same title the priests of Eridu used in the Bit Messeri ritual fragment from Sippar. The death of Gilgamesh, in its account of the Divine Council's deliberation, traces Gilgamesh's Shir-Zid line not just through Lugalbanda and Nin-Sun, but back through Sumerian theological prehistory to the figure the priests of the first city said was only beneath, not gone. Gilgamesh's inherited substance, the text says, came from him. The council overrules Enki. Enlil's argument is preserved in the text. The substance, he says, has already done its damage. The lines that carry it remember what the second creation was designed to forget. The kings descended from the Shir-Zid will continue to perceive what the Apkallu reversal cycle was instituted to contain. The grant of immortality to Gilgamesh would extend the substance for another century, perhaps another millennium. The council, Enlil concludes, has waited long enough. The time has come to end the experiment. The vote is taken, the grant is denied. And the text specifies, in a clause that runs across 2 lines of cuneiform at the bottom of column 3 of the Philadelphia tablet, that on this day the Shir-Zid substance is to be permanently withdrawn from the bloodlines of the human kings of the world. The date is recorded in the line that follows. It is given in the Sumerian style by reference to the sidereal position of the celestial bodies on the night of the vote. The cuneiform specifies that the moon stood at the foot of the constellation the Babylonians called Pabilsag, the archer, modern Sagittarius. The sun was below the horizon in the constellation Lugalbanda, the region later associated with Mercury, and the wanderer, Bib-Bu, the same word used in the path of Anu in Mule.apin, stood in the lion's foreleg, the modern boundary between sextans and hydra. Those 3 conditions, by the standard precessional astronomy that has converted Sumerian sidereal positions to Gregorian calendar dates since the work of Otto Neugebauer in the 1950s, occur in conjunction only once in any human civilizational span. The conjunction occurred in the late 23rd century BC. Within 50 years of the date the death of Gilgamesh tablet specifies, the regnal lengths recorded on the Sumerian King List collapse by an order of magnitude and never recover. What did the Council of the Gods actually do? The standard mythological reading is that the gods withdrew their favor. That immortality was a divine gift, given and rescinded by decree. That the loss of long life across the human bloodlines was a matter of theology, not biology. This is the reading every academic commentary on the death of Gilgamesh provides, and it is the reading that allows the text to be safely placed within the genre of Mesopotamian wisdom literature without disturbing anyone. But the Sumerians, on their own internal terms, did not write theology and biology as separate categories. The medical tablets describe Shir-Zid as a transmissible physical substance. The King List records the regnal collapse as a stepwise biological event. The Diagnostic Handbook treats the phenotypes of Mushutu as observable medical conditions diagnosable by a trained physician. The Sumerians believed they were describing a real heritable trait, and they believed they were describing the moment that trait was severed from the human germline. In the language of the cuneiform's own claims, what the council voted to do on the date the tablet specifies was to terminate the heritability of the substance, not to kill the carriers, not to send a flood, to switch off, at the level of inheritance, the mechanism by which Shir-Zid had been passed from divine ancestor to mortal descendant for the prior 1,000+ generations. The mechanism by which they did it, the cuneiform says, was the gate, the same gate referenced in the Apkallu reversal cycle, the same gate the 7 were said to open when the wanderer returned. The death of Gilgamesh tablet, in its closing column, states that on the day of the vote, the gate was closed in the direction of the bloodlines, and that the substance, which had previously transmitted from generation to generation, could no longer pass through. The phenotypes the Diagnostic Handbook catalogued, the extended longevity, the wound healing, the plague resistance, the Mushutu, did not vanish from the human population the next morning. They faded gradually across the generations following the vote, as carriers died without passing the substance forward. By the post-flood dynasties, the trait was, in the cuneiform's own framing, no longer findable in the houses of the kings. What modern longevity researchers are attempting to engineer in laboratory animals, what the telomere biologists and the senescent cell clearance teams and the CRISPR longevity researchers are trying to reproduce in mice and in pigs and in primates, is, on the Sumerian record's own claims, the substance that was deliberately removed from the human line on a specific astronomical date in the late 23rd century BC. The Sumerians named the day. They specified the celestial conditions. They preserved the council's deliberation. They identified the gene, by their term the substance, and they recorded the moment of its erasure. So what was the gene that made Gilgamesh immortal, and what does the Sumerian tablet that names the day it was erased actually claim? Maybe Sherzid is a poetic abstraction. Maybe the diagnostic handbook's 7 tablets on the not-aging phenotype are clerical work, the priest-physicians fabricating diagnostic criteria for a condition that did not exist. Maybe Andrew George's footnote about the watcher who came before is a misreading of an archaic Sumerian compound. Maybe the regnal collapse on the King List is bureaucratic compression of an oral chronology the early Sumerian scribes simply could not preserve accurately. Maybe the astronomical date the death tablet specifies converts to 23rd century BC by coincidence, not design. But the Sumerians were the most careful record keepers of the ancient world. They wrote down what they observed. They catalogued what they inherited. They specified, on a tablet preserved in Philadelphia, the precise night of the precise year on which the council of their gods voted to remove from the human line the substance that had made their first kings live for tens of thousands of years. The plant of becoming young is in the Euphrates marsh. The serpent took it. The vote was cast in the courtyard of the Ikur. The gate was closed against the bloodlines. And the substance the Sumerian medical tradition called the true flesh has not, on the cuneiform's own claim, been carried by any human being since. Subscribe, because in the next episode we open the 7 tablets of the Diagnostic Handbook. We translate the full Mushutu presentation in detail, and we examine what the modern longevity laboratories are quietly working with in the field they call epigenetic reprogramming that the cuneiform medical corpus described 4,000 years before the word gene existed. The day was recorded, the gate was closed, and the bloodlines of the kings, the Sumerian record says, have never been what they were.